Welcome to our channel, everyone. My name is Joe Buskins. This is our family's boat shop. This is episode 4 of our hardtop mold build. So we are still in the plug building phase, which we'll be able to build our mold off of that and then build a part to go on our 29-foot center console there in the background. But what we're doing this morning is starting off with a guide coat that is made by 3M. You folks have probably seen me use that in the past. Got a little applicator pad, and you got like a dark, like a graphite powder or some other material. I'm not sure exactly what it is. I just know it works really well. And we're applying it in circular motions. And we haven't started doing any sanding yet at all on our hardtop. We're just prepping for wet sanding at this phase. And you want to get a nice uniform coverage. It's okay if you got some little dark spots and whatnot. We just want to be sure we've got some guide coat everywhere. And if you've never used this stuff, it is a way, my dad used to kind of say, just to foolproof it. You know, that way you know for a fact when we've sanded with one phase, we know we've hit all the surfaces and we can move to the next phase. Now, I did mention we're going to be wet sanding. So one thing I did this morning as a precautionary is I ran a bead of some duct tape under here, kind of to create a little bit of a drip edge, because the wood underneath on the jig here is still just kind of raw, unfinished plywood, and I didn't want it soaking up any moisture and possibly changing or distorting. So the idea here is that the water will roll off this edge and then drip down and not affect our plug surface. And folks, I'm gonna have to apologize. Everybody's been watching the channel, you may notice my voice is off a little bit. I have not been feeling well for several days, so the voice is still struggling, so you folks bear with me. I'm gonna go ahead and finish getting this guide coat on, and we're gonna proceed with wet sanding this thing. So this is what we're gonna be working with this morning. We've got just your standard spray bottle, and we added about 1 or 2 drops of Dawn dishwashing detergent, just a little bit. That'll help keep your sandpaper from clogging up and causing problems. And we're gonna be using an assortment of 3M boards this morning. We've got one that's kind of a flexi board and a couple shorter ones, the smaller ones. And we're starting fairly aggressive. Now I'm using 220. Honestly, folks, I've done this an awful lot, and 220 is pretty aggressive, but I'm trying to speed things along. Normally, probably for DIYers, I'd recommend starting with like 320 or 400 on the first pass. But for the sake of time, and as you guys gain some experience, you'll be able to possibly work up to the 220. And we're just gonna do a very light initial knockdown. Just a little bit of water on that surface, each pad there, and then you're gonna get to see what that guide coat is really cool in that it will show you your highs and lows. We're still shaping this up, but I'm not making more than just a handful of passes with this 220, and then we're gonna jump straight to the 400. But check out how quickly we brought that down. Removing material fairly rapidly, and it's gonna show us where little highs and lows are. I don't really wanna remove much more than that with the 220. If you're not careful, you'll put too deep of scratches in there. I'm gonna do this edge just a bit. And I'm using this flexi board because this is a curved piece. 3M also makes straight ones as well. You can see just how quickly we brought that material down. That's gonna show us some highs and lows. So I'll prepare you folks. It's gonna be a whole series. We're gonna go like 200, 400, 600, 800, probably 1200, then buff and compound. But each one of these steps, there's gonna be some tips and tricks in there. And if I haven't said it recently, I wanna tell you guys thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please feel free to do so. And we wanna grow the channel, so if you have some friends or platforms that you might wanna share our channel and what we're doing on, that would be greatly appreciated. All right, folks, so we've made some good progress. Come on over here and you can see where we've sanded. Now, you can still see some of the guide coat in there. I'm not trying to sand everything off because again, I'm starting with a pretty aggressive, a 220 grit, and I'm not gonna be sanding the edges or the corners with that aggressive grit because you gotta be really careful. It's very easy to sand through the edges initially, and we don't wanna do that. There's plenty of phases of wet sanding we're gonna be doing, but I wanted to show you just the general method. Now you could use a water hose obviously for this, but I find that you end up using a lot of water, maybe even too much water. I don't want to flood the shop today or walk around in a mud puddle all day long, so I kind of like using a more conservative method. But we're just real easy. I'm coming from the outside to the middle and continually moving. This panel is curved, and that's why we're using this flexible board from 3M. It'll allow you to follow the contour, but still kind of take out any little lumps and bumps that may be there. All right, a little more water over here. Same deal, you want to just keep moving. And y'all, I apologize so much. I know my voice is terrible. It's been one of those, I don't know what I got into, but it has not been my friend for the last few days. But I'm glad I am actually feeling better than I was, and glad to get some content out and make some progress on our hardtop. All right, so what I'm gonna do now is kind of change direction. Just go in line. Continue to move nice and easy. If you're going to be doing some of this kind of stuff, some good sanding boards. I do like the Velcro versus the sticky back because the water doesn't affect the Velcro ones versus the glue-on pads. Sometimes we'll take these discs off and can reuse them later. All right, and I'm gonna make a bit of a diagonal pass. And I'm gonna diagonal back the other way. So we're still getting very minute lumps and bumps out of this panel. So I'm just using a terry cloth towel I've already made a pass or two. And with wet sanding, it's very fine dust. And yes, you could use a vacuum extraction, like some kind of a sander with vacuum extraction, but maybe a lot of you folks out there watching may not have that. And wet sanding will really keep that airborne dust down to a minimum. You guys can see right in here, see there's still a few little very minor low areas that the guide coat is still showing me, but that is quite all right. And what we're doing today to capture this dust is we just got a 5-gallon bucket with some water in it, and what'll happen is we will throughout the day use that to clean. And if you just let that bucket sit for a couple days, all that sediment will settle to the bottom. You can pour off the clean water off the top and it'll eventually dry out, and there'll just be a little cake of dust, and you can dispose of that in the proper way. So one point of interest, folks, that I want to show you is when you're using the 3M guide coat, you can see we've already applied some here, but it is very important that the surface is thoroughly dry, otherwise it'll gum up and make a real mess. And if you're new to the series and just tuning in, I kind of wanted to back up and show the primers that we are using are some specialized primers. So back in the previous episode, we used this was the first coat, the gray sanding primer, and we are currently using the second one, this gray surface primer. And those are specifically made for this kind of work. I've had some questions regarding, can you use automotive grade? And that's a good question. I really don't know. I don't know that they'll work for sure or not. I do know that these products will. And again, a lot of folks are curious about where to get this stuff. We'll be sure to have a link below the video description. But we're gonna go ahead and apply a little more of this guide coat. Now sometimes you do need to turn it on its end to get a little more. And I'm telling you folks at home, this is a real lifesaver and really make it so that you don't miss anything in the process. We're going to be blocking through the 400, so this is 220 to 400, and then beyond that there's a good chance we'll start using some air tools, and I'll show y'all some variations as well. Folks can see we've already worked our way, like 2/3 of it is done. I'm just kind of taking sections. And as I start different grits, I may start on the front of the panel on one pass and then start at the back of the panel when we change to another grit. That way you kind of overlap your seams and it's an interesting thing. It's repetitive. You're doing the same thing over and over again, but you don't want to develop like a groove or a pattern, or you want to kind of stagger your joints as you're sanding. So in the end, everything is really nice and uniform. I'm gonna do a little on that side, and you can see we're just pivoting right around. Taking a little more off with this 400 on this pass, but we're still not trying to go fully through the primer. It's very easy to get too aggressive sometimes with these early phases and want to take too much material, but if you're not careful you will sand through the primer, and that's not a good thing. Now, as a safety net, one of the good things about the primer we're using, although I don't want to sand through the surface primer, the sanding primer is underneath this, and it still has some ability to pull a mold off of, or a surface if you had to, but I prefer not to. But it's kind of a little safety net there, and it's a lighter shade of gray, so you can tell as you're sanding, if you're getting close or going too far, you can kind of see that happening and maybe reduce the amount of pressure that you're putting on that surface. When we get up here to the front, we can go all the way from side to side. Just continue to vary. Clean my board a little bit here. Try to keep our workspace as neat as possible. And now we can go right to our Yes, it's looking nice. Okay, so we have finished up our 400 grit, and I've wiped it all down, cleaned it and dried it, and hope you guys can look down there and check out what I'm seeing. You can definitely see a shine starting to develop. So we move right on to the 600 grit on the big Hutchins. If you're doing a big job like this too, you might want to consider buying these by the box. I buy these. Again, we'll put a link to all this stuff. You'll save a bunch of money if you buy them in bulk. It's more initially, but if you got a big project, it can add up over time. All right, our pad is good and clean. We've got our guide coat down. Let's see what this big Hutchins will do. so just like that, we went up, down, cross, diagonal, both directions. I'm gonna continue all the way down 600. A lot of folks might even stop at 600, but we're going a little bit further. I wanna show you what she looks like when she's all done. So we have finished up all the 600 with the big Hutchins, and we've moved to a block 600. And I wanted to show you, I've kind of done this facet, this flat area here. We made a pass on that. And now what I'm doing is I'm coming around in very light pressure, and I'm changing the angle ever so slightly every stroke. And then I'm going to move forward, changing the angle every stroke. Move forward. Ever so slightly. You see, we're going from the top to the side, and then we continue to move. We're not staying in just one zone. Very light pressure on these corners. If you're gonna have a boo-boo when you're doing this, it's usually in the corners. That's where people get carried away, so I tend to leave them kind of for last. But look at this. Now, of course, that is wet, but man, we are really making progress. So I've gone all the way around, kind of in line. Now at this point, I'm gonna start on this corner, which I've already done it in line, and I'm gonna start rolling at kind of a diagonal. You notice I'm kind of rocking on my feet every time I'm moving forward. I'm not stationary, I'm constantly in motion. Here you can see some of these facets where I did the original block. Now when I come around with this diagonal stroke, check out how that, you can see right in here where the guide coat, you can see it just disappears. And that is the beauty of the guide coat. Otherwise, it would be so hard for you to tell where you had been or where you had not been with 100% certainty. And I'll tell you what, it's a lot of work. We've been working all afternoon on this, but we're making really good progress. The proper air tools make a big difference. Quality sandpaper that works well. Using some water with just a little bit of soap. And we're just working nice and methodically. So here we go with the 600 and what it should look like. Maybe we can zoom in. And at this point, you're gonna start to see some shine and some gloss on that surface. Now, we have wiped this completely dry. We've blown it off. We're getting ready for another guide coat, but you can already start to see a shine. And again, at this point, if you used a real heavy compound, you would definitely get some pretty serious gloss. But we're moving on to 800 as the next phase because we want this thing to look top notch. And a lot of times going a little further with the wet sanding will save time on the cutting and compounding side of things. And I wanted to mention to you folks, like our regular viewers, there's so many folks out there that are watching from all over the world and really been getting super nice comments. And I had mentioned this not too long ago about if you want to help us as a channel, the watch duration is a big deal with YouTube. So it's not just the subscribers, but it's like when you click on the video, how much or what percentage of the video you watch, then and how much time you accumulate on the channel. And YouTube sees that as a good thing when you spend a long time watching our videos, and then a lot of times they'll recommend the channel to other folks that are searching similar topics. And as many of you folks know, I fish full-time like in the summertime, and I actually do a lot of repair work for other folks, and I would love to do more of the YouTube stuff, and the more the channel grows, the more we can do that. So again, thank you folks so much for your support. And we're also getting to a point where I'm getting a lot of requests for direct time, like consulting. And I'd made an announcement back a couple months ago about offering Patreon as an option. And Patreon is just a way that if you need direct contact with me, if you need some consulting on a project and you want to talk to me on the phone or even video conference, and then you can do it month by month if you want, and there's different tiers there. Because my time right now, we are just running at both ends, and I want to be able to help folks, but I'm getting to a point where I can't answer every question or take every phone call that people are trying to reach me. So got to find a way to manage our time, but you may want to glance at the Patreon membership, and that is another way that you can help support the channel, and I can help support you guys through your projects. So this thing's looking good. I wanted y'all to see what the shine looks like at 800 grit, wet sanding. We haven't done any polishing yet. Fixing to do another guide coat to 1200, and we'll have the finished product ready to show you guys. So we did end up switching over to our 6-inch Hutchins DA, working with the 1200. It seemed to just do a little better job than the big machine. The big machine was awesome for like down to the 800, but I kind of wanted to show you, we're actually using it. Let's see, hang on a second. Get my water bottle. I'll show you, we have sanded right down, but I am using the DA on this page. Doing a roll right over the corner. And then we're doing the little flats right down there. So we have a nice machine finish on everything. So we're about to wrap it up and blow this thing off. We're pretty close to calling it a night, but not before I show you guys what it looks like with 1200. So I had one more little tidbit I wanted to show you guys. I know I kind of jumped ahead of myself, but when we get down to the very, very end, you can see there's a little bit of that guide coat. I just took the 1200 disc that I've been using, and I'm just using it by hand and just going around and doing a little bit of detail work on this edge, not with the machine, but just by hand to kind of soften things, clean everything up. Sometimes a machine can be a little bit aggressive, and I didn't want to put a fresh piece of paper on there because again, these edges can really go faster than you imagine when you start putting a little pressure. But it's just a light touch. Now, one other thing I did want to mention is that this is exactly what you would do if you were building this like as a one-off. You know, this is a plug to build a mold, but if you were just building a hard top and shaping it, forming it, and wanted it to be finished in gel coat, basically the gel coat would take the place of the surfacing primer, and you would just go through that 220, 400, 600, 800, 1200, and then what we're going to do is buff and compound this out and make it shine to a gloss. And that is one of those things I've got a lot of questions about on the channel, is finishing gel coat and making it shine and make it look really pretty. And this is exactly the same process, because basically these primers we're using are refined, very high end. In a lot of ways they're like a gel coat, very, very similar. But yeah, just a little bit more detail work, and hopefully I'm telling you right this time, we are almost to the point where we can look at the finished product. Check it out, everyone. Look at that. It turned out really, really nice. I think that's the 1200 grit. We still got some compounding and some waxing to do, but we're running out of daylight. It's been a long day, a lot of sanding. This is probably about as dirty as I get when we're doing this kind of stuff. Wet sanding can be quite the workout, but it is very, very satisfying, and I hope this content is inspiring some of you folks out there that have been wanting to learn about fiberglass and composites, or maybe building a mold. Obviously, this is a very in-depth series, but my goal is to help folks out there actually be able to build a part and be proud of it, and something that will be professional caliber. And many of you folks out there have been watching the channel, and you've been very loyal, and you comment all the time, and I want you folks that are out there watching to know how much I genuinely appreciate you watching the channel and your support of the channel. And if you guys want to see us grow, obviously, if you have any other platforms, social media platforms, please feel free to share whether it be on Facebook or Instagram, or if there's other boating forums out there, that will help the channel grow. The more the channel grows, the more of this kind of content we can do. So it's Captain Joe here with Island Marine Charters, Fish Bump TV, my fantastic cameraman working hard behind the scenes. And as always, we will catch you guys in the next episode.